Good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started with our City of Brunswick work session for Wednesday, June the 4th, 2025. Time is now 4:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For the work session, we will have a discussion on the tree resiliency plan. That presentation will be done by none other than our very own Mr. Rick Charnock. Mr. Charnock.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm just going to introduce Matt Lee here in just a moment, who is with the Green Infrastructure Center. He is the one with his organization that has, over the last year, I think we were just talking, we started in April of last year, putting together a tree canopy study and a tree plan for the city that'll give us a roadmap to follow. And the grant we received actually came through the Nature Conservancy, and Ashby Worley was instrumental in helping us to get that. She's unable to be here today, so I'm kind of stepping in for her. But it was all done on the behalf of the city of Brunswick, and we're the ones that, the citizens that will receive the benefit from what was done. So also appreciate our tree board members that have come here and in support. They were all intimately involved in putting this plan together. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Matt Lee and let him go ahead and present the information to you. Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
Mr. Lee, as you're coming, would you please also recognize the members of the tree board as well?
Yes. So we have Jill Wright, Suzanne Hurley, and Ann Baptista of the tree board.
Thank you all for being here.
And my name is Matthew Lee. I am the Director of Forest Conservation with the Green Infrastructure Center. It's my pleasure to be able to present some of this data to you all today and talk about the resiliency plan. We have a presentation that I'll be presenting to you all that'll cover kind of the scope of what's going to be in the plan. The plan isn't quite finished being written yet. But a lot of the maps, data, and graphics that you'll see in today's presentation will be elements that will be in the plan that will be presented to you all later this summer, hopefully for adoption by tree board members. So we can go on to the next slide.
Presentation.
Great. There should have been some packets of information given to you all. One of those is kind of an outline for what the resiliency plan is going to look like. This is going to follow the presentation that I'm going to be doing today, which will kind of illustrate some of the data and the graphics that you'll see also in the plan. And then there's another copy that's the strategies that the advisory committee came up with during the planning process. And we'll talk about that in the presentation towards the end. So there's a lot of different content I'm going to go over. Please do interrupt me or ask questions as I go through it, because there's a lot of information and I definitely want to make sure to answer any questions or provide additional clarification that you all may have on the data that's been compiled over the last year. And I will try to keep it, there's a lot of information, I'll try to keep it to my 1 hour, but I may have to breeze through towards the end, which I will try to avoid. But this first slide just kind of talks about, again, some of those different elements that are in the outline here in this packet for y'all to review. So next slide, please. So just for to give you all a little bit of perspective about how the Green Infrastructure Center does canopy mapping in communities, we use a process called image classification. So every several years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has a program called the National Agricultural Imagery Program, or NAPE for shorthand. This is flown for the entire United States every 2 to 3 years. It produces high resolution aerial photography with an infrared band that allows us to distinguish between vegetation and non-vegetation within a community. We map draft land cover for community, and then we work with an advisory committee to review that data for accuracy. So the latest image for Brunswick was flown in 2023. Obviously now it's 2025. So we worked with the committee to be able to identify maybe any discrepancies in how the land cover has changed within the city during the period of when the image was flown in 2023 to when we started working with the committee in the spring of 2024. In addition to mapping tree canopy, we were also interested in understanding what potential planting areas exist within the city of Brunswick. And so these are areas where you're not going to have to tear up asphalt or concrete. There's not a conflicting land use that might prevent a tree from being planted there. So think of a soccer field or a baseball diamond. We obviously don't want to be planting trees in the middle of those spaces. So we also worked with the committee to identify potential planting areas that need to be removed, or potentially some that need to be added back in. So some communities will plant trees in their cemeteries. Other communities decide not to do that. So we tailor the information towards some of the community's priorities and some of the areas they think are most suitable for tree planting efforts. And you can see that in kind of the orange area. So we go through a process of first mapping all of the areas that could be planted with trees, and then exclude areas because of that conflicting land use or because the community doesn't think it's an appropriate place for trees to be planted. Once we've gotten that final tree canopy, land cover data and potential planting area data done and reviewed by the committee, we go back in and we drop hypothetical trees into that potential planting area spaces. So we go in and we drop large trees, which we define as having a 40-foot diameter crown at maturity, and then small trees, which we define as having a 20-foot diameter crown at maturity. And we use setbacks away from roads and buildings and other hard surfaces to make sure that that tree can actually fit spatially within the space in the landscape. And we maximize that space 100%. So we fit as many trees as possible in there through our modeling process. And what that does is it tells us what your potential tree canopy could be. So by knowing what your existing tree canopy is based on the aerial image and how much additional tree canopy you could have possible, we now have a window in which we can set potentially a canopy goal for the community. And it's a goal that can be more realistic for your community rather than just saying, let's plant 40%. The data is tailored towards your specific capacity in terms of the physical spaces that trees could actually fit within the city. Next slide, please. So the city's canopy is 30% citywide. Now that's not evenly distributed across the city. So think downtown tree canopy is not at 30% versus the historic district just south has a much greater percentage of tree canopy. And I'll talk about how we looked at the distribution of the canopy by different geographies or areas of interest within the city. The impervious surfaces were also mapped, and then scrub vegetation. So this is like bushes or shrubs. This could be some small trees that didn't quite meet our cutoff for height to be included as a tree, and then lawn and turf spaces. These numbers also only reflect the terrestrial lands within the city. As you can tell in this kind of map over here, there's a lot of salt marsh and water that's within the city's jurisdictional boundary. We did not count that space as part of the calculation for your canopy percentages because we can't really plant in water or salt marsh trees. So we don't want to factor that kind of land cover into the analysis. Next slide, please. Citywide, there's about 7.5% of it was potential planting areas. This translates to about 365 acres of potential planting area. When we did that modeling process, which dropping those large and small trees into the landscape, we're able to fit about 25,000 small trees and about 20,000 large trees within the city for a total of about 45,000 additional trees that could be planted in Brunswick. Growing that canopy out, that means that the potential tree canopy for the city could be 38%. So that's if you planted every square inch of potential planting area that was not going to have a conflict with other land uses. That was the maximum potential tree canopy that the city could have. Now, the Green Infrastructure Center does not recommend planting 100% of your PPA as a goal. We really recommend to the committees and the communities to set no more than 50% as a more realistic goal. And that's because getting 100% buy-in is not going to be really super realistic, because there's a variety of people that live in the community and land uses and land desires for their properties. You know, trees are going to be in conflict if you want to grow tomatoes or prize roses, or if you want to have space in your backyard for a trampoline for your kids. So, you know, we try to set more realistic goals of capping that at about 50% of the PPA. So in theory, going forward, if you wanted to increase your canopy, you know, 34% would be a more reasonable upper threshold to aim for in the future. Next slide, please. We were also fortunate that Georgia Tech had just completed a recent research study. They looked at tree canopy and mapped tree canopy for all of the coastal counties along Georgia. They were looking at previous time periods, so 2010 and 2019. What this allowed was to have historical data to kind of see what the trends are in the city's canopy over time. There's a little bit of slight differences in the methodologies. So we processed their raw data to be more compatible with ours. And if we go to the next slide, what we can see is that over the last 13 years, the canopy has been relatively static over time. There's been a 1% difference between 2010 and now in terms of loss of tree canopy. And so what that tells me is that the canopy is remaining relatively stable. We're not seeing a long-term trend of decline for the tree canopy. And so that's good news in that you're not losing a lot of canopy, which is great, because sometimes for some communities, they need to stop the losses before they can really start to gain new canopy. Next slide, please. In this particular map, we color-coded the different years of canopy. So green is the most current for 2023. Blue is for, I believe, 2019. And then brown is for 2010. So we can kind of see in some areas of the city where those canopy losses are occurring. So really focusing in on kind of larger patches of canopy or forest that have been lost, and not so much of, when you look closer at the data, you'll see there's kind of margins around the tree canopy that looks like losses or maybe gains. But some of that has to do with the discrepancies in how the images were flown in previous cycles or years, and how that reflects to the modeling process. So we really wanted to hone in on these patches of forest where we know, okay, this was land that was cleared for whatever reason, new development. And, you know, we were really, that 1% loss was really kind of illustrating those larger patches. So it hasn't been much loss. I think it was about 49 acres that tree canopy had been lost in the last 13 years. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we also wanted to do is look at the distribution of the canopy. So an average can be misleading. And so we wanted to be able to highlight different areas where there could be potential planting projects, or understand where there may be inequities in the distribution of the canopy. So one of the areas that we looked at were the neighborhood planning areas. We looked at the data for that to see how the tree canopy differed, how much potential tree canopy could be added to this particular neighborhood associations. And also we looked at how much impervious surfaces were located in those zones. Most of the MPAs are higher than the citywide average of 30%, with ranges between 33 to 43% tree canopy. Next slide, please. We also looked at all the streets within the city to see how well canopied certain street segments are. About 55 miles of roads have greater than 25% tree canopy coverage within 50 feet of the road center line. So looking out 50 feet on either side of the street, how much canopy was overhanging into the street to provide ecosystem service benefits, shade for people walking or biking along those streets, or being able to capture stormwater to mitigate those impervious surfaces. There's about 48 miles of roads that have less than 15% tree canopy, and 30 miles of roads with the potential to increase the canopy along the length of them 25% or greater. So good opportunities to kind of identify certain road segments within the city that maybe public works or volunteers could help prioritize tree planting efforts on. Next slide, please. We also looked at it by every parcel within the city. So the city was gracious to give us the parcel data, and we were able to actually quantify the amount of canopy on every parcel. So again, helping us to tailor the data and be more nuanced, thinking about going forward with tree planting options or strategies. About 47% of the parcels within the city limits are greater than or equal to the citywide average. But 17% of parcels have 15% canopy or less. So just a way for us to be able to kind of sort the data and think strategically about partnering with different landowners within the city to be able to plant trees or encourage them to plant trees through different policies or programs that the city might want to offer. Next slide, please. In addition, the study also was looking at some of the ecosystem service benefits that the tree canopy provides. This in particular is some data from a U.S. Forest Service tool called iTree. This is a software that you can find on the internet. It's produced by in collaboration with Davey Tree and Arbor Day Foundation and the U.S. Forest Service to kind of help identify ecosystem service benefits that trees provide to communities, such as stormwater management, energy savings, air quality improvements. This particular data is more tailored for trees for if you have tree inventory data. So if you're going around and actually tagging and marking individual trees along streets or in parks, you can use this information to quantify those benefits by species and the size of the tree. We didn't have tree inventory data for our project. The city is in the process of going to be collecting that data. So that will be valuable information that can then go into this plan or be like an appendices to this plan once that data has been collected. And I'll talk a little bit more about tree inventory data later, but we were just kind of highlighting some software applications that the city can use going forward to when they have tree inventory data available to quantify some of those ecosystem service benefits. Next slide, please. But what we were able to do is use the canopy data that we produced to be able to quantify some of those ecosystem service benefits. So we're able to understand how much air pollution in terms of particulate matter, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and sulfur dioxide that the tree canopy is sequestering or filtering out of the air every year. We also looked at how much carbon sequestration and storage the tree canopy is providing. So things like, sustainability plans, or if the city were interested in tracking greenhouse gas emissions, this is data that would be useful for helping to kind of put some negatives on the balance sheets. Most communities will track vehicle emissions or other emissions that the city is doing, but they oftentimes don't acknowledge the contribution that the tree canopy is providing at reducing emissions within a community. So this data is good for, making a case for a public health campaign, encouraging people around, green infrastructure is helping to create healthier communities. Communities that are well treed tend to have, at the neighborhood level even, tend to have less asthma rates. So being able to make a lot of these connections for people in the community to encourage them to support or participate in this type of programming at the city level. Next slide, please. We're also able to quantify the amount of stormwater impacts the tree canopy was providing. So during a 1-year, 24-hour storm event, which in Brunswick is about 4 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, the tree canopy captures about 9 million gallons of water and prevents it from going into your municipal stormwater system. So that's stormwater that doesn't have to be treated or be managed in terms of impacts to your gray infrastructure. So the less the volume that goes into your gray infrastructure, the less wear and tear, the longer lifespan you'll have in that gray infrastructure, and the more or the less flashiness or erosion that can happen to things like streams or ditches, as well as water quality impacts. So we are able to calculate that the tree canopy also removes about 7,000 pounds per year of nitrogen from entering local waterways or the bay. 575 pounds per year of phosphorus, and about 592 tons per year of sediment. And so all three of those different pollutants can cause different problems with aquatic wildlife, algal blooms. They can cause, fish kills. The sediments tend to clog fish's gills. So by reducing the amount of non-point source water pollution entering into your local waterways also helps you keep in compliance with state water regulations as well. Next slide, please. We also did some surface temperature mapping to identify kind of the hottest areas within the city. This data here is from a study that was done in 2019 called Killer Heat in the United States. And what they did was they looked at the historical record from 1971 to 2000 on the average number of days in the city that were above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in any given year. And that was about 23 days per year between 1971 and 2000. Looking forward, in about 10 years, 10 to 30 years, they're projecting that to be about 90 days per year, above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So almost quadruple the number of days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which has public health implications, and livability implications for residents in the community. If we look at towards late century, that's projected to be up to 121 days per year, or about a third of the entire year being above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So I like to illustrate this data when I'm presenting information like this to communities, because if we want actually to mitigate urban heat island impacts and make our communities more livable for our residents, we need to start planting trees sooner than later, because in order to achieve those cooling effects of those trees, they need at least 20 to 30 years to grow. So by trying to, offset or minimize those 90 days per year, we need to be thinking about planting trees in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please. So with that temperature data, we're also able to combine it with census data to identify priority zones that we might want to focus on for tree planting efforts. And so this data here, this map shows the hottest places within the city, but also the places that have the lowest relative median household income. And so these are residents who have lower incomes on average compared to other residents within the city, and are also suffering the greatest impacts of heat within the city as well. So maybe investing tree planting efforts in those communities first, who have the least amount of resources to be able to plant a tree on their property, or to mitigate the additional impacts of heat through AC or other cooling efforts. So it's a way for us to kind of be able to create more nuance in the data, and then be able to prioritize limited resources towards areas that need them the most. So within this particular analysis, there was about 85 acres that were in these high priority zones, about 125 acres that were in a moderate level, and then 72 acres that had lower priority, either because they were cooler or the median household incomes were much higher relative to the average. Next slide, please. We also utilized data from the tree equity score. So this was a tool that was developed by American Forests, another nonprofit organization that focuses on trees and forests. They developed this tool, again, to help prioritize communities to make sure that trees are being planted in neighborhoods, or at least at the census block group level, where they're most needed. And so they had a whole list of different attributes that were used to help identify priority zones or areas. We were able to use that data along with the updated data that we made for the city with your updated canopy data and potential planting area data, to tailor that to, again, be able to prioritize those resources in neighborhoods or sections of the city where there were vulnerable populations, or there was low canopy already existing. Next slide, please. So that was the canopy mapping. I'm going to pivot for a second and just talk about some other assessments that we did as part of the study. One of these was we did a review of the codes and ordinances of the city and how well were there programs, practices, or policies that promoted the conservation or preservation of mature tree canopy during the development process. So we have an audit tool we used that went through systematically different areas of the city's codes and ordinances to see how well they scored for their ability to protect or preserve existing mature tree canopy. So there's kind of two levels here. There's planting new trees, but there's also conserving or preserving the amount of canopy that exists already. One, because existing canopy is providing more of these ecosystem service benefits that I talked about. And two, that there's a big lag between those new trees that are planted and when you'll achieve those new benefits. So this kind of helps to understand a more fuller, comprehensive picture around urban forest management within the city, and not just focus solely on tree planting efforts. I like to say you can plant 1,000 trees, but if you're cutting down 3,000 trees, you're never going to win at the game. Next slide, please. So this was kind of the score across different categories within the tool. So we break it out from like monitoring versus emergency response to planning and goal setting. So there's kind of different categories to them. And you can see there's a variability across which the city scored. This is not a bad score by any means. You know, I've never had a community score 100% in all categories. Every community has room for improvement, but this kind of gives us a baseline to understanding kind of what changes could be made either policy-wise or programmatic-wise even at the city. So at the next one, these are the top recommendations that came out of that audit. These were presented sorry, next slide, please. These were the top recommendations that came out of the audit. These were presented to the advisory committee, and they used this information when we were talking about potential strategies that are appropriate for the city. The two orange ones that are highlighted, those are things that when the audit was done, the city had not had, but are just in the process of, they're in the process of hiring an arborist, and they're also in the process of conducting that public tree inventory. So just wanted to highlight that those are two really key recommendations that the city is already making progress on during the course of this study. I won't go through all the different recommendations, but some of these were considered by the advisory committee when we were developing strategies for the city. And then some of these will be included as just general recommendations and best practices that GIC likes to promote as part of the plan as well. Next slide, please. So if these recommendations were enacted, this is how the city's score could change. So again, having that baseline, if all of these were enacted, this is how the audit would improve if it was done again, just to kind of give some baseline data for those policies and practices, which can oftentimes be hard to quantify. Next slide, please. So a lot of that stuff that I just talked about was stuff that we normally do for any tree canopy study. But the special thing about Brunswick's study is that it's a resiliency plan. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was really look into the future about what impacts are potentially going to happen to the tree canopy, especially as we start thinking about environmental factors such as storms, sea level rise, future climate. So there are some really great climate tools out there. This one is from the University of Maryland. They did a study kind of comparing how future climate is going to change for different cities across the globe and finding an existing comparison. So what is the future of the climate going to look like in Brunswick today? How can we make a comparison of that in today's climate? And so the closest comparison was the San Luis Potosi state province in Mexico. So the climate is projected to be more like in the coastal Gulf region of Mexico in the future, in the year 2080. What that means is that the summers are supposed to increase on average of about 7.5 degrees Fahrenheit and be about 6% wetter. And then in the wintertime, be about a 7 degrees Fahrenheit increase in temperature and 15% wetter. And so of those, I think that the winter one is more of an interesting perspective for trees because many trees require a certain amount of cold temperature, especially our deciduous trees require a certain amount of cold temperature for them to be able to thrive during the winter season. And so it being warmer is going to kind of interrupt that process. And then also the amount of additional possible precipitation because the city does have issues with drainage and stormwater impacts because of how much rain you all get here. Next slide, please. We can also see that winter temperatures being reflected in the USDA plant hardiness zones. There's a calculator tool that kind of projects what hardiness zones are going to look like going forward into the future. And so the winters are more likely to look like Orlando, Florida in terms of winter temperatures by the year between the years 2040 to 2069. So again, thinking about tree species that are maybe more tolerant of more subtropical temperatures or climates when thinking about like preferred tree species lists or recommendations to the community about the types of trees they should be planting, we can maybe potentially be looking at communities and what trees they're planting in more southern areas like in Florida, Central Florida. Next slide, please. So getting into some of the threats, we looked at projected sea level rise. We used a 2 feet by the year 2060. 2 feet of rise in sea level would impact about 19 acres of tree canopy, which is about 1.3% of the total tree canopy will be underwater by 2 feet of sea level rise. There's also an additional 33 acres at risk of inundation by sea level rise as well because of proximity. For a total of 52 acres of tree canopy at risk, or about almost 4% of the existing canopy. Next slide, please. We also looked at the PPA and its impact on sea level rise, or the impact of sea level rise on PPA, I should say. About 15 acres or 4% of the PPA will be inundated by that 2 feet. And then about another 2 acres are at risk of 2 feet rise for a total of about 17 acres. So these would be areas that we wouldn't want to plant trees in because we know it's going to be underwater. Or have significant exposure to salt water, which most trees are not tolerant of. So thinking about areas that you may want to avoid planting trees in through the lens of sea level rise, we have now data to kind of tell us where to avoid. Next slide, please. We also looked at salt stress. So most trees are not very tolerant of salt. It tends to kill them. And so not only about, the 2 feet of sea level rise is where the sea is actually going to rise to, but then you have things like high tides or king tides. So you're going to have saltwater exposure to root systems or even salt spray coming off of the bay, getting onto the leaves of trees and causing stress. And while that may not kill a tree outright, it can contribute to the death of the tree if there's multiple compounding factors such as salt stress plus a really hot, dry summer, or salt stress plus an invasive insect pest. So there's any number of factors that this could help weaken some of the canopy and cause further decline or losses or mortality. So there's about 88 acres of tree canopy that are at a greater risk of vulnerability to saltwater exposure in some of these yellow areas in the transition zones, and about 19 acres of PPA, again, that had that saltwater exposure risk to it. Next slide, please. We also looked at storm surge. We only modeled for a Category 3 hurricane, looking at the NOAA's historic hurricane tracker website. It seemed the more likely extreme event for Brunswick. Now, that's not to say a Category 5 hurricane couldn't impact the city, but historically, according to the modern record keeping for hurricane data, there hasn't been one. So we decided to just model with a Category 3 hurricane. Based on that storm surge, there's about 376 acres of tree canopy that are at the highest risk of storm surge, with about 688 at moderate risk, about 284 at low, and about 16 acres at very low risk. There's not really a lot of things that you can do about storm surge for tree canopy in terms of advanced preparation or readiness. But it is good to know that, you know, these could be the potential impacts to tree canopy. Next slide, please. We also looked at inland freshwater flooding or flooding from rainfall or precipitation. Now, this modeling did not factor in the existing gray infrastructure for the city. The city's existing gray stormwater infrastructure inventory is not complete. So this doesn't reflect, you know, the existing infrastructure in there, but kind of looking at what areas of the city are more is the tree canopy more vulnerable to ponding and flooding or saturation of soils. And this allows us to kind of understand locations where maybe we want to plant more trees to mitigate some of these impacts of stormwater or localized flooding, or specifically plant trees that are more flood tolerant. So there are trees that can tolerate freshwater flooding. And so prioritizing species lists or making recommendations to community members when they're asking about what trees to plant, identifying what area from the city they're coming from and maybe making more appropriate species planting recommendations to them based on data. Also kind of helps us understand some of the impacts of stormwater. So if the city lost, and this is a hypothetical we did in our modeling, if the city lost 1% of its urban tree canopy, which is about 51 acres, and 20% of that land area was converted to impervious surfaces, so about 10 acres converted to impervious surfaces, then there'd be almost an additional 1 million gallons of surface runoff that would be created by those changes in land cover. So it only takes a small amount of land cover changes and impervious surfaces to be created to have a pretty outsized impact on stormwater runoff, which then is going to be an issue that the city will have to help manage through either new gray infrastructure or other stormwater management practices. Next slide, please. So using the data, we're able to kind of identify the best places to retain existing tree canopy. So the darker green areas in this map show areas where the tree canopy is doing a better job at managing stormwater on the landscape. So being able to conserve or preserve those darker green areas could be a bigger priority during the land development process, for example. Not to say that trees are not doing a good job across the board, but giving more nuance to where are the green infrastructure resources in the city, the natural landscapes, doing the better job and doing the most to minimize impacts to those spaces. Next slide, please. And then kind of the reverse of that, this is the potential planting areas where planting trees would have a greater ability to infiltrate stormwater into the ground. So these are better draining soils within the city. And so planting trees in these locations, in the darker orange locations, will help infiltrate stormwater into the ground rather than becoming that surface runoff and contributing to overloading the gray infrastructure system or pushing water quality pollutants out into rivers or bays. Next slide, please. This one was looking at heat stress on existing tree canopy, so those urban heat island impacts and how they are impacting existing trees. Again, a way to kind of create more nuance within the data, particularly maybe helping with some management practices on trees that are going to have that greater exposure to heat in the future. Maybe these are trees that need more frequent irrigation or need to have required irrigation systems set up to them because of the extreme heat, so that they are not stressed out and are less likely to die during long droughts or periods of really high temperature. There's only about 2.5 acres that are at the very high risk, about 20 acres that are at high risk, but most of the city falls under that very low risk at about 840 acres. So there are some areas, and again, it helps us kind of tailor or create more nuance with how we implement tree planting or tree management actions to the areas that need them the most based on the data. Next slide, please. We can also look at how hot some of these potential planting areas are. So again, some species of trees are more tolerant of higher temperatures. So again, planting trees that are adaptive to those locations based on the data can help us have those trees survive and live longer and be more successful into the future where it's projected to be a much hotter climate. Next slide, please. We also looked at pests and tree canopy. So this is an example of a tree that's probably under a lot of stress. And so a lot of these environmental factors that I talked about, so salt, flooding, heat, they all contribute stress to a tree. And when a tree exhibits stress, kind of like a person, they exude that out into the world. Well, insects pick up on that and they tend to target those trees and attack them and kill them. So the more that we can do using this data to mitigate some of those stressors to those trees, the less likely we'll have issues around pests. Now, the good news, since maybe some of this is not a lot of good news, but some of the good news is that there's not really pests are not really supposed to increase dramatically into the future, barring any new kind of invasive species introduction. So if a new insect pest came from somewhere else in the world that's never been here before, we can't say that. But as far as the known pests that are in the United States and are causing damage to trees and communities, we're not projected to see a dramatic increase in herbivory of those species going into the future. Now, that being said, there are several types of insects, pests, beetles and borers, caterpillars, and scale insects that are likely the biggest factors, and reducing those stressors on trees from flooding, heat, and salt will go a long way at minimizing those impacts of those trees. Next slide. So certain pests have certain host preferences. So some of the species that are likely going to be impacted most are going to be your oaks, your maples, your cherries, and your pines from those different types of insects that I talked about. Next slide. Yeah, this one goes into kind of the beetles situation. Early detection and monitoring is key for a lot of these species. Especially particularly the Asian longhorn beetle. There's a quarantine outside of Charleston County in South Carolina where they're trying to control the species there. So it's not that far from Georgia, although there hasn't been a confirmed sighting of this species in the state of Georgia. It's not too far away, just on the other side of y'all's border. So that monitoring is really key. Having a city arborist on staff will be able to do some of that monitoring to make sure that pests like this are managed before they become an outbreak situation. Next slide, please. Caterpillars, they don't typically kill trees like beetles do, but they can cause some damage, particularly to young trees. So just being mindful about caterpillars on young trees and treating them. Next slide, please. So the biggest takeaways for pests and the resiliency plan are species diversity. So maintaining a diverse urban forest is going to minimize the potential of spread of insect pests. So just like in an agricultural system, monocultural crops are more vulnerable to pests or disease outbreaks. The same is true with our urban forests. So anything that we can do to interrupt the movement of those species on the landscape or minimize the total losses. And this is something that's had to be learned kind of the hard way through like Dutch elm disease or emerald ash borer, where some communities in the Midwest lost 20–30% of their entire canopy because they had overplanted certain species. So just balancing the proportion of species that are planted is a really key way moving forward. And so your tree inventory data is going to be a really valuable data set that will help you understand the percentage of your tree population that is a particular species. And you can start doing things to diversify the urban forest so that you have less exposure or risk to things like pests and diseases. Monitoring is really effective, and there's great partnership opportunities with local extension offices. There's a lot of really great other partners in this area that are interested in these topics and can help potentially partner on some of these issues with the city. So next slide, please. Another thing that we did, I know you're like, oh my gosh, more. The Urban Tree Risk Index model. So what we did was we looked at how can the city be more responsive or ready for managing a storm event or a natural disaster. And so one of the largest things that's generated from a tropical storm or hurricane is vegetative debris. So trees falling over, blocking roadways, taking out power lines. We were able to create a model to kind of help the city prioritize key street segments for access for emergency medical services. So is the roadway to the hospital clear? Can we make sure that the trees along that road are really well taken care of so they're less likely to fail during a storm and block the road for the ambulance or the fire station or for the fire truck to reach those critical infrastructure in the community so that the city can get back online and be responsive during that immediate aftermath of the storm. So next slide, please. So we created a map of the street network. And red is very high sections that should be monitored on an annual basis. And if there are trees that are flagged for maintenance needs, those should probably be mitigated or pruned or trees removed, whatever the action is first, because they do provide those critical linkages to that critical infrastructure within the city. We worked with the emergency manager for the city, as well as the advisory committee, to kind of identify all those assets where trees might cause a blockage or come down. So this is also looking at trees on and around properties like the hospital or the fire station. And so this gives a framework for being able to be most efficient with limited resources. So next slide, please. Looking at the entire road network, now we know that there's about 20 miles that should be very high on people's radar to monitor annually and to make sure that we're mitigating risk along those sections of streets, versus a total, I think there's about 220 miles of total roads or streets within the city. So now we've been able to become much more efficient with resources to minimize impacts to the greatest extent possible by focusing on sections of the street network or street grid that are going to be the most impactful for emergency responders to be able to use and access. So it kind of gives a framework for that monitoring and for prioritizing maintenance needs so that you're making sure in a storm response that these critical routes remain open and people have access to these facilities. Next slide, please. We did, as part of the project, besides the steering committee of stakeholders, we had 29 committee members from 19 different types of stakeholders. So from government staff, both local, county, and state, NGOs, the tree board, utilities, academia, local tree businesses, and some residents that participated. We did 9 different workshops over the year, presenting these and all these different topics. I know you guys are kind of getting it all at once, so I apologize for that. But we spread it out over 9 workshops that the committee was able to review the data and make comments or feedback on to help us make it more accurate. We also conducted a public tree survey starting in February through April of this year. There were 2 physical locations where people could go and take the survey with some of the maps displayed. One was at City Hall and one was at the public library. That was open for 6 weeks. We also had some tree board members and other community partners take the survey out to some local festivals like Coast Fest and the First Fridays in April, and engage with residents at those different events to try and get them to weigh in on our tree survey and provide additional information about what they thought about trees, what they valued about them, what strategies they thought were the most appropriate for a resiliency plan for Brunswick. And then we held a public open house that was on March 27th. We had 2 different sessions, a midday lunchtime session, and then an evening session on that same day, where all of these maps were presented. There were strategies that the community could come and vote on, and then of course talk with different members of the committee or the tree board or my staff, who were able to answer questions about the data and the project. And then of course we're having this work session right now with you all. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of summary of the open house feedback. There was 22 total members of the public that attended both sessions. 16 wanted further updates and information. 14 would be willing to plant a tree on their property. 13 would be willing to volunteer to collect data or help steward trees in the community. Schools and parks were top places identified for tree planting efforts during the open house. The Tri-Area neighborhood was top voted neighborhood for tree plantings as far as the neighborhood associations. And then the tree benefits that were most valued by the people that attended the open house were the cooler temperatures that they provide, how they beautify the community, the clean air, and wildlife habitat. Next slide, please. Looking at the survey data, we had 95 respondents take the survey, the online survey. I should also mention too, at the public library and the city hall, there were paper copies of the survey that people could also take as well. But we had got 95 respondents to the survey. 55 residents from the survey took the survey. So we made the survey open to anybody that lived, worked, or played in Brunswick to kind of get some of their thoughts and opinions. Where would they like to see trees planted? Most responded that places such as public parks or along streets were the overwhelming majority of the survey respondents, with the others also getting some additional preferences as well. Next slide. What concerns do people have about planting trees? Long-term care was the biggest concern, but also unsure of what species to plant. And so with this data, really helping communicate areas of the city where certain species should be and should not be planted will be helpful for residents trying to make those decisions. And so this data can really be important in helping guide them in that selection process. Next slide, please. What did they value most about trees? Again, like the open house, shade, air pollution, wildlife habitat were some of the top choices. Next slide. Would you be willing to plant a tree on your property? Most respondents, about almost 70%, said yes. Those that said no, most of them were 38% of the people that said no said that they were renters, and so they weren't sure if they had permission. So there could be some barriers to getting some trees planted for some residents, and something for tree board members or other folks that are implementing tree planting projects in the community should think about. Next slide, please. And then the best strategies that they thought for increasing tree canopy resiliency in Brunswick were 41% require developers to plant more trees in public spaces, tree giveaways, updating city codes, tree care workshops, hire an arborist, and so forth down the list. So, some of these things, again, like hiring the arborist, the city is already in the process of working on. So next slide, please. What are the greatest challenges facing trees in Brunswick? Unsurprisingly, people thought storms were the greatest challenge, and then development, and then lack of maintenance. And then it drops kind of dramatically down to a hotter climate, and then some other factors as well. Next slide. So I know you can't read this at all, but this is the strategy document. I'm not going to go over all of the strategies in this table, but the strategies were split up into a variety of different objectives. So one is like planning and policy was an objective. One was increasing, planting trees to increase resiliency. One was objective was around education. One was around community stewardship. And then one was on partnership development and engagement. So different strategies were broken out in different categories to kind of create a more holistic set of strategies to work on to build capacity, because it's not just about getting more trees in the ground, but it's about taking care of those trees, creating a sense of stewardship within the community. And so education is another big one, particularly around species that should be planted. So the committee did a really great job of coming up with some different strategies. These are the ones that were presented at the open house. And then we worked through, once we got back the survey information, we worked through developing which ones are the highest priority versus moderate versus low, and then potential actions that can be taken to achieve those strategies, a time frame on which to try to achieve them within, what potential stakeholders could be leaders on that particular strategy or partners, and then what metrics could they use to identify whether or not they're being successful at achieving those strategies, and what potential funding sources would be necessary or could be sought out to fund those strategies if money was an issue or funding was an issue. So this gives a kind of a framework or a roadmap for the different stakeholders to now work on and continue to coordinate and meet around for implementation. Next slide. So the project next steps are kind of finish writing the resiliency plan. It's about 70% complete at this point. We are hoping to finish it within 2 to 3 weeks so that we can send it to a typesetter to have it professionally typeset so that it also looks beautiful. So the goal is that the plan will be completed by the end of July, and then the tree board members and city staff plan to bring it before this commission for a more formal adoption later this summer or possibly early this fall, depending on how things work out. And then moving forward, continue to plan and coordinate and move into the implementation phase. So starting some things in this summer, but looking towards the fall and beyond when we start getting into the tree planting season. So I think that is my last slide, and I made it right at the hour. So, but are there any questions from you all on the commission at this point?
Comments or questions from the commission?
I have a question.
Mhm.
I know the attendees responded that Tri-City needed more trees. I'm just wondering, I mean, I know it's within the neighborhood, but I'm trying to get a more closer, like where? I'm mapping out Tri-City, the the Tri-area in my head, and kind of like, where is it along the MLK street, or where they want these trees? I'm just, how do they pick out Tri-area?
Yeah, I'm not sure why people voted for the Tri-City area that they did. It was a small sample size, but something that the steering committee had talked about was also now needing to take this information to the neighborhood association groups and get more feedback directly from some of their meetings that they hold. And so I think that could be a great question that's posed to the Tri-City residents of like, okay, where in your neighborhood do you think trees are most needed at kind of a site scale level.
Right,
Yeah.
because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Because it is very small
Mhm.
and part of it, when I think about when you come from Alabama going west to MLK, there's a particular area that's concentrated with trees
Mm.
and then, but mostly buildings, and then MLK is kind of like empty, but it's not developed. It's just open space. That's
Yeah,
all.
yeah. And that's one of the challenges is that even at the neighborhood scale, there can still be a lot of unequal distribution of the canopy. So pockets of forests or clusters of trees, but then you've got big open spaces where it might just be vacant land or turf.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
I look forward to seeing it. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you and everyone put together to put all these statistics together about the trees. Trees are beautiful, and I will be honest, I do get nervous when storms come because they fall.
Mhm.
Sometimes in the middle of roadways, or sometimes on people's homes. So I get really nervous, but trees are beautiful, and thank you so much once again for all the work that you all did to put all this together.
Yes, and one of the things I should have mentioned during kind of the storm section was there are certain species of trees that are more wind resistant. And so that could be like another category of information that's shared with residents. So if someone is wanting to plant a tree, but they're nervous about storms, then maybe they plant a more wind resistant tree, or they plant a smaller tree that would still provide some benefits, but not fall through their house or something like that. So figuring out ways to engage people where they're at so that they're wanting to plant a tree, but addressing that, trees do fall and they have caused damage. And that's a real lived experience for some people. So,
You addressed in the presentation about the rate of loss, but I don't think you addressed the type of trees. Is there a specific type of tree that's more susceptible to the rate of loss, or how is that?
yeah, great question. So that is one of the limitations of the canopy data is we can't say specifically like what types of trees are being lost. That's where more of the tree inventory data becomes important because that will identify the specific species of trees. The current mapping of species of tree canopy, like the specific types of trees that are in cities, the modeling is just not good enough for it to be, you might as well just flip a coin kind of thing. It's like 50-50 almost. So it's just not reliable in terms of being able to model specific species. But maybe at some point in the future, with the way computing is going and AI and all that kind of stuff, there could be possibilities for that, but not currently with what technology we have available.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so my next question is, so when you're planting trees, because I at one time had the big huge trees. I don't know what they would call that. I just know they were big, huge trees. And one was in the back. A storm came through, blew that big gigantic tree down. Just thank God it fell backwards in between houses, two houses behind me, and
Mhm.
not towards my house, because it would have took my house out.
Yeah.
And then I had one of the same size in the front. And so I had the arborist, the tree specialist come out, look at that one, got that one cut down because we were in storm season.
Hmm.
It was susceptible being to the storm and all that good stuff. And so, but one thing about trees that scares me when you're planting them in residential areas or around properties is because the big one I had in the front of my house started to causing damage to my foundation because the roots were spreading out, and they're going to go wherever they want to go.
Mhm.
And so those roots are like huge. And so they go to spreading out. So my question pertaining to that is, how will you determine where best, like if there's a development or something, how will you determine best to plant what type of tree would be necessary that would not cause damage to those foundations in those homes, because you can plant it today, but as it grows and gets older and the roots get larger, they start spreading out, then it's going to go wherever it wants to go. And now you're causing, those roots are causing damage to foundations and all of that stuff.
Yeah, great question. So you could try and plant a smaller size tree. I'm not sure exactly the species that you have, but maybe it was was it like a live oak that you had in your yard?
Yeah, it was,
Yeah,
it was the, I mean, it was
yeah.
probably about big, I have half size the trunk of this room, probably. That thing was huge.
Yeah, so trying to find a species that won't get nearly as big, and so kind of reducing the likelihood that those roots are gonna spread as far and cause as much damage. So, kind of just assessing how much space is really there. Usually for tree roots, they spread as far as the size of the crown. So if we're talking about a 40-foot crown, we're talking about a 40-foot diameter crown, we're talking at least a 40-foot diameter root system underground that's supporting that tree. One of the things that will be included in the report or the plan is the research indicates that trees falling over usually tends to be because there's not enough rooting space for trees to begin with. We try to kind of cram them in these little narrow spaces between the sidewalk and the curb. And we're like, well, why did this tree fall? And it's like, well, you just gave them a little itty bitty spot to anchor into. So by making sure there's adequate soil volume and like soil surface area, you can really limit the amount of trees that topple in storms. And so some of it gets into, site design and site development. So if possibly like incentivizing or working with developers to usually in the design process, like the landscape architect is like the last person they call to come in and look at things and kind of, oh, we have to have some green stuff. Where can you sneak it in that fits the requirements of the code? So thinking about that, on the front end of things, because trees are the green infrastructure, they're providing, shade, they're providing stormwater, they're providing wildlife habitat. People are more likely to walk if they see trees in their neighborhood. So it's as integral part of our infrastructure as like electricity or water or sewer. And so really communicating that to developers and seeing how you can maybe work with them. And then communicating that to a homeowner too. Okay, well, don't plant this little, you have this little patch of place where you can plant a tree. Don't plant a live oak. Yeah, it fits there when it's 5 years old, but think about it, when it's 55 years old, it's going to be much different. And so, you can do some things like, this is what this tree is going to look like when it gets big, when you're offering trees at a tree giveaway or you're working with students to plant trees. Like, don't think about a tree as a small thing, even though you see it as a small thing. Let's imagine it as this massive thing that it's going to be in the future.
Yeah. But one thing I do miss about those trees is that my light bill wasn't as high, and my grass seemed to have done a little better when it had the tree shade. So,
Yeah.
for the direct impact from the sun. But
Mhm.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you,
you're welcome.
and thank you all for all the work that you've done on this.
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say thanks for your hard work, Matthew and Tree Board and Rick. You guys all worked really hard on this, and looking forward to seeing the next step and doing some implementation and start making some changes. So thank you.
Great.
Good to see you in person without headset
Yeah.
on too.
No, amazing to the tree board. To thank you for all of the work that you all have put in. This is an amazing outcome of the work, and it gives us a lot to think about and a lot to build on. I think as a municipality in the future, I will just ask a couple questions. The first, inside of it, you talked about a replacement plan, and just if we're going to put that into a city document that could find itself changing what businesses that come to the city or developers that come to the city may have to do. What does a good replacement plan look like in your estimation in places where you've seen it done well? The reason I ask is because some people brought it out in the survey, so I wanted to ask it. Is that a city-funded replacement plan? Is that kind of guardrails that you put on developers that you say 1 for 3 or something to that nature? Or is that third party, you want to try and, fund a foundation or something to really think about that long term? What is the best way that you've seen it done?
It's really all of the above, because in most communities, the city typically only manages or owns about 20% of the land when you think about public property in the right of way. So in order for you to have meaningful impact on the urban forest, you have to work with a diversity of landowners. And so, nonprofits and private foundations are going to be able to access or connect with people in different ways than the city might. Some people are mistrustful of government, but they may be more receptive to a nonprofit or a local community organization that's trying to connect with them about trees. And then, yeah, the development community certainly plays a role, just trying to offset some of the impacts that the development process has. Now, that doesn't mean that it's like anti-growth, but also just kind of recognizing that, um, land development is a very important process, and we need to be kind of balancing our environment with our economic and housing needs as well. So it shouldn't be like this, but it should be more like, how do we work together to come up with a livable community that you all want? And so I think being able to integrate maybe some elements of this plan, or one of the things we'll try to do is integrate some of the comprehensive plan and other plans that the city has done to showcase that, like, this is not just like a rogue plan that's kind of going off. It's like, no, this complements your comp plan. This complements your stormwater master plan. This complements other actions that the city is, leading on. And so it's really meant to complement and not be a barrier for economic development or growth or anything like that.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just two quick questions. I thought it was very interesting in the survey that you all did. 12% of people, I think, thought about trees as a source of food, which I think is extremely important. We are, changing over a grocery store, and there'll be a large gap of time before we have that grocery store back. So thinking about what it really means for individuals to have access to food in their yards and in their communities actually is extremely timely. As you all look at it, what are the viability, or what is the viability of fruit trees and the like in a climate such as this? I think we have some lime trees around the track in Howard Coffin, but just wondering, did you all give any thought to trees that can survive and grow food for individuals?
We did not look at a kind of a specific list of trees, but some of the, pecans and walnuts, citrus would still do well, although I know Florida growers are having some issues with citrus issues. But yeah, I think seeing, most fruit and nut tree species are going to probably still do well in this, even in a future climate here. It's really more of your, like, the species that you see that have their most southern range. So like your northern red oak and some other things that you more associate with like further northern latitudes, those are going to have more troubles because it's like, well, this may be the most southern extent of their native range. And so that's going to push them probably further north, but you're going to have maybe some more species that are suited for Florida coming south to north. So you could also think about, looking at other organizations or community organizations, community greening in South Florida has a lot of citrus projects that they do, and they give away different fruit trees. Could be an opportunity to learn from some of their experiences, because the climate is going to shift. And so we could see how, they find success in, what they do in their area.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation, and
Yeah.
thank you guys for your work.
Thank you.
We are going to move right into. Say that again. Oh, we got 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Quick break.
No, we good. With that, we'll move right into our 5:30 public hearing, and I will call to order the Brunswick City Commission public hearing for Wednesday, June 4th, 2025 at 5:30. Our public hearing is a finance public hearing for the City of Brunswick proposed fiscal year 2025-2026 budget. City Manager McDuffie.
Good evening. And I didn't get a chance to tell them how much I like trees, but I bought my house because of the trees that are over it. But now Commissioner Roll has me scared about the storms, and Commissioner Harris had me thinking about my foundation. So a lot of concern and consideration about the trees. But anyway, thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed budget for 2026. Of course, this is our public hearing, which is required by state law. We advertised in the paper on May 28th for the hearing to be conducted at 5:30 this evening. So thank you for this opportunity. I'll wait for my slides. Okay, gotta get that. So of course, this is the proposed budget. Next slide. It includes our page that shows our officials for the city, including the mayor and commissioners, as well as our department heads and managers. Next slide. It also includes a transmittal letter that basically talks about the fiscal year and the upcoming opportunities and challenges that we have. As you know, our economy is changing. Every day things happen that will impact the city, funding opportunities, things like that we look at, as well as the growth in our community and jobs and the increased costs that we have witnessed over the last few years. We did look at our operation and assess our personnel, and we accepted some requests that were made by the departments, which are included in the budget. As we continue to try to improve the services of the city, you know, the commission has required us to look at all of the things that we are providing, and we think it's really, really important for the funding for our housing program, as well as our transit program that we're trying to establish. So all of those things are included, supported by the budget. Next slide. Next page, please. So if we look at the 2026 budget highlights, the general fund budget is proposed at $23,918,344, which is a 5% increase over last year. It includes $6.3 million of property taxes, $10.4 million of sales taxes, and $4.2 million of other taxes, which is a total of $20.9 million, which represents 87.5% of the total revenues projected for next year. It also includes an appropriated fund balance of $750,000. In our expenses, we have authorized personnel, and we will be reconciling that because we have had some questions about the authorized personnel from last year to this year. So I will send out a reconciliation of that for the commission and put that in the information that's kept in the clerk's office for the budget review. As I stated, key initiatives for the budget include the housing development and community revitalization program, which we will roll over money that we put in the budget for last year from that $2.5 million of ARPA funding. We also have proposed operational changes to incorporate a night court operation for our municipal court. We have positions in our finance area, in our police department and planning areas. We are proposing to change our fleet management for our police department, and also look at our recycling program in our waste disposal. Additional highlights for the budget include $134,000 for maintenance for our Axon equipment that we purchased for the police department, another $100,000 of upgrades to the police department computers and vehicle computers, and then $75,000 for the land bank and $30,000 for incentives for our public safety employees. Next slide. And the next. We are on schedule as proposed. As I stated, the budget was publicized on May 28th, and we are conducting our public hearing. We've had some subsequent meetings with the commission during this time, and there will be some adjustments made to the budget. All of that information will be sent out next week for the commission preview before the budget is requested to be approved on Wednesday, June 18th. Of course, our fiscal year starts July 1st. Next slide. And the next. And the next. Okay. As I stated, of course, $20 million of our revenues are from taxes. We have another $567,000 for licenses and permits. We have $80,000 of intergovernmental revenue, $315,000 of fees, $451,000 of fines, $580,000 of miscellaneous revenue, which includes $350,000 of interest income, and then the $750,000 of appropriated fund balance for a total of $23,918,000. Next slide. Of our revenues, of course, as stated, the property taxes represent 35%, the sales tax represent 44%, our fines and fees 3%, and the other revenues represent the other 25%. Next slide. Of our expenditures, our general government is $5.6 million. That includes the commission, the clerk, city manager's office, IT, HR, our tax collection, our general government buildings, our general administration, which includes our insurance payments and general payments for electricity, for street lighting and things like that. Our police department is budgeted as $6.5 million, our fire department at $3.9 million, and public works at $2.6 million, for a total of $13 million for public safety and public works. The other departments, including recreation, planning and zoning, are total approximately $3.2 million, and additional payments that are be transferred to the housing and the transit program of $400,000, and then transfers to other funds, including E911 and the Roosevelt Harris Center is included in the other funds for $1.4 million, for again, the total $23,918,000. Next slide. Our budget, of course, by service area, 27% of the budget is spent on the police department, 16% on fire, 16% on public works, which that's about 60% of our budget. And then we have approximately 24% for government and general administration, and the remaining portion for recreation and planning. Next slide. Our total cost of personnel presented in the budget is $17,085,520. Of that, I cannot read. The salaries are $13,227,000, which is 77% of the total. We have another $1.5 million for our pension plan, $1 million for Social Security, and $1.1 million budgeted for our health insurance. Next slide. Our authorized strength was presented or proposed at 254 full-time positions, 10 part-time. And again, that is being reconciled from last year. And we added 3 positions to the budget for this year. And this includes our part-time and our full-time staff. Next slide. Of our authorized positions, the bulk of them is Police Department has 78 positions, Fire Department 56, and Public Works 59. Our other areas include Neighborhood and Community Development and Planning and Development, which has 15 and 27 and 15 respectively. Next slide. Our budget includes the proposed budget includes 3 new positions. There will be some adjustments made based on meetings that we've had with the commission and other input that we've gotten for personnel changes. The budget also includes a 3% salary adjustment that's calculated to be about $226,000. In addition, the budget includes $378,000 for vehicle replacements and $104,000 of machinery and equipment replacements. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Questions or comments from the commission?
Madam City Manager, I was just looking at the budget highlights in your forefront of the actual budget and the property taxes. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. You have 6.3 million in the highlights, but when we go on the first page behind the summaries and charts, does that reflect, is that supposed to be the same as your general property taxes?
There are some additions in there, and I have to look at it, but it's kind of a collection of property taxes and some other fees. Yeah, the general property taxes, what I reflect on the highlight is specifically real and personal property taxes.
Okay.
The others, the other
8.4.
taxes has like, I'm trying to think whichever, the insurance premium tax, I think, or one of the other taxes that's added in there. But yeah, the 6.3 is actually real and property taxes.
Okay. So what makes up the other taxes in your budget highlight, that 4.2 million? I just want to make sure.
The insurance premium tax and then the Georgia Power payment that we get, that's about $2.5 million of that. And then the penalties and interest and other things that are associated.
Now, we also you highlighted about the night court. Will the night court have incurring more overtime, or would they adjusted hours for the clerks to work to cover the night court?
We haven't quite figured out all the logistics, but I think they will be setting the hours for the court to start later or something like that.
So would the
where we
clerk
won't-
come in, work later and not have a lot of overtime?
Right,
Or
or either have a half day
half day?
to
Okay.
adjust that schedule.
And in creating this budget, did any of our departments have to decrease their budget from 2025 fiscal year?
In most cases, the decrease came in the line items of the budget. The salaries, most of them didn't decrease overall because of salaries. And when we put in salary increases, and then we have the health insurance increases, and the pension, then those increases mostly increased. And then, but some of the budget operating part did decrease.
The operating part for each department had to decrease?
Some of them.
Some of them. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Questions or comments?
Sorry. Commissioner Atkinson, Williams addressed the, night court. Did we ever get any reasoning, or purposing of night court?
Well, the reason is because a lot of people work during the day
Mhm.
and it makes it hard. They don't have proper, I guess, childcare. And there's been, need for court hours outside of that 9 to 5. And we're just trying to get it more accommodating, convenient, and it was recommended by the court clerk.
Okay, that's what I want us as the DOS to know, as well as the public to know, that there is now that opportunity for the accommodation of those people who do work during those regular, usual court hours.
Yeah, it's not, we basically are trying to respond to the public need.
And that there's also a component that we are, as a municipal court, we would be the lowest hierarchy on, so it'd be municipal court, magistrate, state, superior. And so anytime attorneys or other court professionals like translators would have a conflict in a higher court, they are bound to go to that court. So the trial court dates, which would be the night courts, are going to be the most important dates where we need all staff and personnel and the attorneys available. And there are quite a few people that show up, present, and maybe have to take off a day of work. And it was just hopefully a convenience for the general public, but also to make sure that we don't have to repeatedly continue cases because attorneys aren't available or there are conflicts with higher courts.
So it would in essence, affect more efficiency and proficiency of the court.
We hope so. Yes, that's what we're going for.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we will open it for public comment. Do we have anyone signed up, City Clerk? No one is signed up, so I will leave it open for, since this is open session, for the requisite 2 minutes. I don't know, a minute. What? You all tell me. I'll say 1 minute. That feels good. So it is open for public comment. Sorry, two great things. One, is anybody online? And no one is online. It is still open for public comment, but we have one more question from Commissioner Williams.
Madam City Manager, and within this budget, I'm just wanting to make sure I didn't overlook it. Do we have another budget item, vehicle to be purchased for administration?
There are vehicles. I will itemize all the vehicles. There is one other replacement vehicle not for the administration, but just for the carpool.
For the
Yes.
carpool?
Mhm.
Carpool for which department? Just
Any and all,
any department?
yes.
Well, I will request that whatever you all do or the purchase or be prior to purchase, that we are fully notified.
Yes, I will make sure. We have, I think, maybe 5 vehicles other than the fleet that we have for the police department. Those will be itemized in the budget, and then when we get ready to purchase, we'll notify the commission. Yes.
Okay, and then we also encourage to shop locally if we can as possible. Show comparison when you cannot shop locally. Thank you.
We are still open for public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, we will close the public comment period. Does any action need to be taken right now?
No, thank you. The budget I'll send out some adjustments, some information next week for review, and then hopefully be back for approval on June 18th. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. With that, we will move directly into our Brunswick City Commission meeting, and I will call to order our Brunswick City Commission meeting, regular scheduled commission meeting for Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. can we please all stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance? The invocation will be given by Pastor Day of Union City Church, amazing community member. We see you everywhere, so thank you for not only being an amazing leader in our city, but also an amazing pastor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, let's pray. God, I know it's been a long day, doing a lot of important work. But God, we want to take a moment right now to just recognize that everything that is happening in this beautiful city is under your leadership and your sovereignty. And I'm grateful that we have a city that cares for your people. And I'm thankful for the leaders in this room that are trying to discern and lean in to see what the vision is that you have for our city. And so as we even go into this meeting for the rest of the night, God, I pray that their eyes and their minds will be set on things above, that they will not become nearsighted or fatigued by what they see, but really what the vision is that you have for the city. And so, Holy Spirit, I just pray that right now you give us a moment of resiliency, hope, and your justice and love to lead us, God. That what takes place in this room will be something that aligns with what you're hoping for your people, your city, your community here in Glenn County, in Brunswick, and all the things that are to come. In your name we pray. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. We will now move on to the approval of the agenda and the adoption of the June 4th, 2025 regular meeting agenda. Is there any addendums or subtractions? Hearing none, we'll open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt the agenda for June 4th regular scheduled meeting as presented.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by the sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. The agenda is adopted. We will now move on to recognitions, presentations, and awards. And with that, we will move on to the recognition of retiree Captain Michael Waters. We could please have you come to the front. Before we read our proclamation and give you our thanks, I want to open it right now to have our chief and assistant chief come up and say some obviously amazing things about you, but to also let the community know what you have meant to us and to us as a city.
See you again, sir. Mike Waters, Captain Mike Waters, has been a very positive influence. The years that I've known him, he's always been a very cheerful individual, very fun individual to be around, and has been quick to share some of his experiences. I know with me on his last day of retirement of service, we sat down and had a conversation about some war stories and about some lessons learned, and it was a very positive experience. The only thing, I wish that we had a way to further pass that along to some of our new people, because that experience is always valuable to individuals looking to spend 36 years in the fire service. The Brunswick Fire Department is an aggressive fire department. It has been for years before I got here. It's been known for aggressive firefighting, and for someone to say that they've been able to spend 36 years doing that and now retire and go have hopefully a long and joyous retirement is a massive accomplishment. And we thank you for your service. Thank you for your dedication to public safety. Thank you for your dedication to the city. Appreciate it.
I'm going to give each of us up here a chance to say our little thanks in the way that we can to you, and then we'll present you with plaque and a whole host of other things. I'm sure the parties are going to continue. And then we'll ask everyone to come up and get a picture with you as well. So we'll start. Commissioner Savy.
I'll just again echo what the Assistant Chief said. Thank you for your dedication, your hard work. I know our citizens really appreciate your service to our community. So thank you again. Look forward to hopefully you enjoy your retirement.
I just want to say thank you for your due diligence and for your dedication. I also want to thank you for coming up here with that big smile on your face, because it speaks volumes to say that evidently there was something good about working for the Brunswick Fire Department. And so we want to just say thank you for all that you've done and all that you have given to the city of Brunswick. And good luck. Enjoy the rest of your time.
As the other commissioners say, just thank you so much for your service for 36 years with the city of Brunswick. We know you probably could have worked in any other city in Georgia, but you chose to call Brunswick your place of work. So thank you.
Captain Waters, I'd just like to say I enjoyed your retirement party. But most of all, they didn't get the best joke of them. Captain Waters, I can't repeat it, but he told a joke that he really got me. Trust me, I was very green. So I wanted to say thank you so much for all your service that you have done for the Brunswick Fire Department, and enjoy retirement.
Captain Waters, as all of the commission has said, and I'm sure your fellow firemen and others have said, the biggest thing that we can say is thank you. There's no plaque that we can give. There's no statue that we can build that even says thank you enough for you devoting your time, you devoting your efforts, and obviously sometimes sacrificing other things that you had in your life for our city to keep us protected and keep us safe. We know that type of sacrifice doesn't come just by you sacrificing, but by family members sacrificing, by other people in your life sacrificing. And because of their sacrifice, we were able to call our city a safer place. So for the time that you have spent with us in the city of Brunswick, we have been tremendously blessed. We know we will be at a loss when you walk out of those doors, but we also know that you've trained a lot of others to be ready to step into those big shoes that they'll have to fill. So we just want to say thank you as a commission, and even more so, thank you as a city. I don't want to throw a speech on you, but I'm gonna open the mic for you.
Never expected to be a fireman. My dad was in construction. When I came here, I was one of the first carpenters to be hired on the submarine dry dock. So, me and my wife were high school sweethearts. We've been married forever. Got married in '86. We've known each other since 3rd grade. We started dating in 8th grade. So my wife knew a good thing when she met me. So, but come here. My dad had cancer. He passed away. My wife was working for a doctor, and one of the ladies that she worked with was worked with her, and her husband was a fireman, and he was fixing to quit fire department and go to the Captain Joe's restaurant. His dad owned Captain Joe's. He's gonna take it over. Job opened up. My job was ending because my dad passed away. I was either gonna have to move away or I was gonna have to stay. Decided to stay. Applied. Here I am now. Story short, I enjoyed the fire department. Great bunch of guys and gals. We had a lot of good times. Had a lot of bad times. Seen a lot of. I tell everybody I've seen birth to death. So it's a tough job. It's not for everybody, and the ones that are here are pretty tough people. So I thank everybody that I worked with. They all gave me respect, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed going to work, So when you have a good job like that, it's not work, It's just a good life, And I've had a good life. Appreciate everybody that's done everything for me. And this is cool, I wasn't expecting this, So I really thank y'all, and maybe I'll see y'all at Walmart, pretty cool there. There you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Testing.
Oh.
Um, That is amazing. With that, we will move on to public hearings, new alcohol beverage licenses. Deputy Brown.
Good evening.
Evening.
We have an application for retail beer and wine for Marshside Market located at 2304 Glen Ave. Management here today is Ms. Sherry Medlin. They were formerly Striplings. I'm pretty sure you guys know. So, Ms. Sherry, come on up.
Good evening, Ms. Sherry. Thank you for being with us. If you could just tell us a little bit about your business, what you plan on doing in the space. I think we're all very familiar with the space, but just tell us what you plan on doing there.
We plan on continuing the same kind of model. We will not have the meat market, unfortunately, but we will still provide hot food, cold food, convenience store items, grocery items, and of course, beer and wine.
Wonderful. I think we are all aware of kind of the permit type, retail sale of beer and wine, and you answered the Julie Martin question, so I don't have to answer it or ask it. It also sounds like they went and got straight to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions or comments for the manager from the Diaz?
Can you just share your hours of operation that you think be open?
We are going to extend the hours to be more of a convenience store model, just depending on safety and stuff. Right now, we're going to operate from Monday through Saturday, 6:30 a.m. till 10 p.m. and Sunday from 7 to 7.
Awesome. Thank you.
At the Urbana Perry Park NPA, you were able to present to that NPA. You said that you all were not doing the meets at present, but is there a plan? I thought I heard that there was a plan after a certain time frame had expired that you may move back into that.
Right now, we're under a contractual, we can be getting out of the franchise for 2 years. So we're unable to provide any kind of fresh, like butcher shop meat. We are looking into some options for pre-packaged, like you would get at other, locations. such as Walmart or something like that, to see if it's, the attorneys right now are trying to see if that's something that we could bring in.
Okay. And I just wanted that to kind of know that it wasn't something that you all just say, we just not going to do it anymore. It was a
Yeah.
reason behind that. Okay, thank you.
Any other
And-
questions? Oh,
And I'm sorry, because even more so, and we even discussed it at the NPA, the transitioning of Winn-Dixie to the Aldis and what gap that's going to present for the community and the importance now of having something to fill that space. So that all of those discussions were held at that meeting. Thank you.
questions or comments?
Will the gas station still be attached to?
Yes.
Okay. And I couldn't remember, were you employed as well with Stripling's?
Yes, I actually opened the store, so I've been there since day one.
Okay, so just because I was just gonna, just as a reminder, before when you all had to implement a system to make sure that they checked IDs and beer and wine, just making sure that that would still continue.
Yes, that's still
Okay.
in place, yes.
So you were the previous owner under the
I
other
was the general manager.
general
We
manager?
still have the same owners, yes.
Oh, okay.
We just got out of the franchise.
Franchise. Okay, no problem.
And hopefully pending permits, we're looking for Tuesday afternoon. So be ready to roll.
For your grand opening?
Just to reopen the doors. We'll have a grand opening probably after July 4th weekend.
Okay. And you mentioned, I think, the Waycross Hosts. Do they still come?
Yes,
Okay.
Tuesday through Saturday, they'll be there.
Okay. The donut shop. Thank you.
The real question. I like it. And this is just a question. Stripling's, I'm assuming, had a contractual agreement that if you ever leave their franchise, you can't sell certain kinds of things.
Correct.
Okay. It's interesting.
Some things are out of my control.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
understand. That's interesting. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
One question. This is, where is the nearest Stripling's? I have 2 gift cards I have never used. Can y'all honor it?
Right now we can't because it's totally, we can't do anything, any kind of merchandise, anything with their name branded, anything. You can do striplings.com. You can spend them online.
Okay.
Tifton is probably the closest location.
Striplings.com.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no other questions or comments, we will open it for public comment. And we will leave it open for 20 seconds. Seeing no one come forward for public comment, we will now close the public comment period and we will open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the retail sale of beer and wine to Marshside Market. I apologize.
Here in the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Here in the first and a second, all those in favor show by a sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you so much. With that, we will move on to items to consider for approval. Approval of May 20, 2025 regular scheduled meeting minutes. Are there any addendums or subtractions? Any changes? Hearing none, we'll open it for a motion to approve.
Mr. Mayor, I recommend that we approve the regular scheduled meeting minutes for May 20th, 2025.
Here in the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Here in the first and a second, all those in favor show by a sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes and the minutes are adopted. We will now move on to city attorney's items. Number 5, consider approval of resolution number 2025-07, special election to include a referendum for the electors of the city of Brunswick to approve or reject the act providing for a new homestead exemption for the city of Brunswick ad valorem taxes.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I spoke briefly about this at the city retreat, but there would be a need now that we have our Home Act passed and signed into law by the governor of the state of Georgia to place the question on the ballot. If y'all remember, in our bill and then what subsequently became a law, there is a component of that that requires a referendum by the city voters. We have an election coming up in November, so this resolution will be by the city council to place, city commission to place that question that was included in the law on the ballot for the city residents to vote on. So if approved, the city clerk would forward that with the question to the Glenn County Board of Elections and have that question be included on the ballot in November.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
My question was only the wording that stated, it said special election, so I just,
Oh, that should have been removed.
okay, because I'm like technically it's,
It's not, it's a norm, it is a
okay,
general election, yep.
right.
I see, yep.
And then I reckon that being that it was just recently signed by the governor, it would have been too soon to add it on the election that's in June, just asking.
I think the law actually reads that it would be in the election in November. I
Okay.
believe there's actually language in the law that
Okay.
says the next general election in November.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion that we approve resolution number 25-07.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second? Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes.
And before it's sent over, I will make the correction from Mayor Pro Tem's correction. I'll make sure I get it to Naomi before it's sent over to the Board of Elections.
Wonderful. Wonderful. With that, do we have anything for executive session?
We do litigation.
We are
Personnel?
in personnel. We'll open it for a motion to adjourn for litigation and personnel. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we proceed into executive session for litigation and personnel.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We are adjourned to executive session. We have returned from executive session. No action was taken. I will now open it for a motion to adjourn. Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor show by sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, we are adjourned.